If you have not been with us the last 2 days, let me briefly review. We have looked at the religion of Islam. We have looked at who was Muhammad, what are the basic doctrines of Islam. Last night we spent considerable time examining whether or not the Quran possesses attributes of divine inspiration. I want to continue that thought a little bit at this hour before we move to another important subject at our worship hour. We saw, for example, that the Quran openly advocates, sanctions, encourages polygamy. The only way for us to know how to view that issue is to turn, I think, to the Word of God, because it possesses the attributes of inspiration. It's been proven to be true. And while polygamy occurred in the Old Testament, it's obvious that it was never God's intention, God's ideal will. When he expressed that at creation. He created Adam and Eve. He didn't create 2, 3, or 4 women for Adam. That would have been the perfect time to set the prototype down. But he did not do that. Lamech was the first polygamist. And when you come to the New Testament, it's very clearly excluded from God's view of the home and marriage. So this is shocking to Christian sensibilities, and it's shocking and unacceptable to our civilization, our culture. Anytime there have been moments in American history where polygamy reared itself, it was addressed forthrightly and punished as an illegal activity. And not only have we had sodomy laws in every state of our country from the very beginning of our country, we have also had laws against polygamy, bigamy, and the like. There's another issue, though, that I think needs to be addressed in a seminar like this. Does the Quran advocate violence? What have we been told since 9/11, even by our own politicians? Oh, Islam is the religion of peace. These are a few isolated, oddball radicals that involve themselves in this kind of behavior. But Islam is a peaceful religion. That's what we've been told. Who do you believe? How do you decide? Well, it's the same thing with the Bible. You'll get all kinds of people saying all kinds of things about what the Bible teaches. But can't you go to the Bible and determine what it actually teaches? Look what all's been taught in Christendom about baptism. It can be sprinkling, pouring, immersion. It precedes salvation. It comes after salvation. You got all kinds of ideas. Well, has God left us without the ability to sort through that thicket of confusion and arrive at the truth? I do not believe He has. I believe when Jesus said, "You shall know the truth will make you free," among other things, He implied we can arrive at the truth on anything that matters to Him. Well, may I suggest to you that the Quran is understandable, even though written by a human without divine guidance. Nevertheless, you can determine from that book what is the actual view of violence and war. Let me prove it to you. If we didn't have multiple examples, and we identified some of those last night, just in America in the last 50 years, how about this passage from Surah 47? When you meet in battle, okay, we could stop right there, right? Don't need to go any further. We've already established the point. The Quran advocates warlike behavior. When you meet in battle those who disbelieve, here's your Arabic word for infidel, then it is smiting of the necks. This is Muhammad Pickthall's translation. You and I have noticed this concept of beheading that's so prevalent among the so-called terrorists. Where'd they get that barbaric behavior? It's in the Quran. When you've routed them, then making fast of bonds, afterward either grace or ransom, till the war lay down its burdens. That is the ordinance. If Allah willed, He could have punished them without you. But thus it is ordained that He may try some of you by means of others. Here is Allah speaking to Muhammad, saying, You know, if I wanted to punish people without you being involved, I could have done that. But I've not chosen to do that. You are to make war on them. And notice this isn't a matter of interpretation, translation. This is very clear. And notice those who are slain, he will not render their actions vain. That is, they will be rewarded in paradise. Here is Surah 2. Fight in the way of Allah against those who fight against you, but begin not hostilities. This is a very early surah where Muhammad was gaining and building military capability, and so much of his involvement was largely defensive warfare because his fellow Meccans were giving him trouble. Allah loves not aggressors. Slay them wherever you find them. Drive them out of the places whence they drove you out. For persecution, look at this carefully, persecution is worse than slaughter. Think of the implications of that statement. It would be better for you to slaughter your persecutors than to endure their persecution. That's the exact opposite of what Jesus said. Fight not with them at the inviolable place of worship, that's the Kaaba in Mecca, until they first attack you there. But if they attack you there, kill them. Such is the reward of disbelievers. If they desist, then lo, Allah is forgiving, merciful. Fight them until persecution is no more and religion is for Allah. This is the passage that many commentators say is saying Islam is to wage war until the entire world has accepted Islam. And religion is for Allah. If they desist, let there be no hostility except against wrongdoers, the forbidden month for the forbidden month, forbidden things in retaliation. Anyone who attacks you, attack him in like manner as he attacked you. Does that not also sound absolutely, incontrovertibly the opposite of what Jesus said? Somebody hits you, what are you to do? Know that Allah is with those who ward off evil. Here is Surah 2, further in that surah. Warfare, this is Allah speaking to Muhammad, warfare is ordained for you, though it is a hateful thing. But it may happen that you hate a thing which is good for you. It may happen that you love a thing that is not fighting, which is bad for you. Allah knows, you know not. They questioned thee, O Muhammad, with regard to warfare in the sacred month. Here's what you're to say or recite to them. Warfare therein is a great transgression, but to turn men from the way of Allah and to disbelieve in Him and in the inviolable place of worship and to expel His people thence is a greater with Allah, for persecution is worse than killing. They will not cease from fighting against you till they have made you renegades from your religion, if they are able to do that to you. That is Surah 2. Moving to Surah 22. Sanction is given unto those who fight because they have been wronged, and Allah is indeed able to give them victory. Surah 61. Allah loves those who battle for His cause in ranks as if they are a solid structure. This is a battle strategy. This is not figurative language, it's literal. Here is, by the way, the Saudi Arabian flag. Surah 9, freedom from obligation is proclaimed from Allah and His Prophet, Muhammad, toward those of the idolaters with whom you made a treaty. This is in context, historical context, is talking about how Muhammad had so many enemies that he would make treaties with some of them to get them off his back while he waged warfare with others. Once they were subdued, then there was no need for those treaties, and so an effort was made to eliminate them. Travel freely in the land 4 months. Know that you cannot escape Allah, that Allah will confound the disbelievers. A proclamation from Allah and His messenger to all men on the day of the greater pilgrimage, that's the annual pilgrimage to Mecca, that Allah is free from obligation to the idolaters, and so is His prophet. So if you repent, it will be better for you, but if you are averse, then know that you cannot escape Allah. Give tidings, O Muhammad, of a painful doom to those who disbelieve. That is, you don't believe in Islam, excepting those of the idolaters with whom you Muslims have a treaty. and who have since abated nothing of your right, nor have supported anyone against you. Even though he made a treaty, if those individuals did anything in the background to aid and abet his other enemies, then that nullified the treaty and he was able to go after them. Fulfill their treaty to them till their term. Lo, Allah loves those who keep their duty. Then, when the sacred months have passed, slay the idolaters wherever you find them. Take them captive, besiege them, prepare for them ambush if they repent and establish worship and pay the tax that would be imposed upon them, then leave their way free. How many of these passages do we have to look at before we realize we've been lied to? We've been misled about this subject. Here is Surah 9:29. Fight against such of those who have been given the Scripture, that would be Jews and or Christians, as believe not in Allah nor the last day, and forbid not that which Allah hath forbidden by His messenger, and follow not the religion of truth, until they pay the tribute readily. A tribute, a jizra, was imposed upon Christians and Jews by Islam, and that continues to be the case in Islamic countries. This is Surah 8. Fight them until persecution is no more, and religion is all for Allah. If you come on them in the war, deal with them so as to strike fear in those who are behind them. You know, if you can get the front ranks in a battle to turn tail and run, what's that going to do to the soldiers behind them? They're going to be unnerved, and they'll be more likely to turn tail and run. So again, here is a passage from the Quran giving advice on war strategy, how to carry on warlike behavior. Lo, they cannot escape. Make ready for them all you can of armed force and horses tethered. O Prophet, exhort the believers to fight. If there be 20 steadfast, they can overcome 200. If you have 100, you can overcome 1,000 of those who disbelieve, because they are folk without intelligence. It's not for any prophet to have captives until he hath made slaughter in the land. You desire the lure of this world. Notice this passage, and it's historically talking about a specific battle. But here Muhammad is being told, you have no business taking captives. You're to kill all of them. Now, there's not an Islamic cleric or scholar on earth that can deny that that's what this passage is saying. There may be effort to soften it. Well, you know, that's because they had mistreated them, and they'll say things like that. But they don't deny that this passage is saying very forthrightly that you are to kill all of your enemies. Keep your duty to Allah. Here is Surah 47. Therefore, when you meet the unbelievers in fight, smite at their necks. But those who are slain in the way of Allah, He will never let their deeds be lost. Soon will He guide them and improve their condition and admit them to, and here is the Arabic word for paradise. So does the Quran teach that when a terrorist gives his life by killing others for Islam, that he will earn a ticket to paradise? Now, we've been told that's the case, have we not? Well, there it is. Quran teaches it very clearly. O ye who believe, be not as those who disbelieve, and said of their brethren who went abroad in the land or were fighting in the field, if they had been here with us, they would not have died or been killed. Again, Islamic scholars tell us this is talking about a specific battle where the Muslim army marched out. Some of them didn't go. They stayed in camp. And Muhammad noticed those who had not gone, but he didn't say anything, went on to battle. When they came back, of course, a number didn't come back because they had been killed. And those who had stayed in camp said, see, you know, if you guys hadn't gone off to war, we wouldn't have lost all these good men. And notice this revelation from Allah that rebukes that attitude. What? Though you be slain in Allah's way or die therein, surely pardon from Allah and mercy are better than all that they amass. What? Though you be slain or die, when unto Allah you are gathered. So those who fought and were slain, verily I shall remit their evil deeds from them, and verily I shall bring them into gardens underneath which rivers flow. The Quran is very clear about this concept. That's Surah 3. When discussing this matter with Muslims, here is the response. Well, again, this is all defensive warfare. Muslims have not been aggressive. They have been simply defending themselves because they're persecuted, mistreated, and that's all they've done. Protecting themselves from aggressors who initiated hostilities against them. Well, there's no doubt that sometimes that is the case, sure. But that cannot be the sole explanation for what has happened in the last 1,500 years. Here's an article from, the London Times. One of the world's most respected Deobandi scholars believes that aggressive military jihad should be waged by Muslims to establish the supremacy of Islam worldwide. Justice Muhammad Taqi Usmani argues that Muslims should live peacefully in countries such as Britain, where they have the freedom to practice Islam only until they gain enough power to engage in battle. Mr. Usmani, 64, sat for 20 years as a Sharia judge in Pakistan's Supreme Court. So notice that's not a kind of an oddball view. That is a prevalent, widespread, prominent view by those who advance Islam. Do you know, right here in our own country, this is last year, there was a little parade, and an atheist it was kind of like a Halloween parade, and the atheist dressed up like a zombie Muhammad. And a Muslim was so offended that he assaulted the fellow, beat him up. And it went to a judge, and the judge threw the case out and said he had a right to beat you up. You offended him. And he said, after all, it offends me too, because I also am a Muslim. And therefore, this Muslim was obligated to attack the victim because of his culture and religion. This is the insanity that we are facing right now in our country. And the other crazy thing about that is they won't even apply that equally to everybody else. And if you're going to use that rationale, well, then that ought to apply to everybody, all religions, all viewpoints. You offend another person, they have a right to punch you out. But no, it seems to only be applying in many cases to Islam. The Arabic word jihad is used 40 times in the Quran. 36 of those times it is referring to subjugating infidels in holy war. Now, think through history. Remember I pointed out to you, and I've got these figures directly from Muslim scholars. Muhammad engaged in 27 military campaigns. He planned or authorized 38 additional ones. He eliminated Jewish tribal opposition, remember, in Medina, by beheading some 700 or 800 Jewish men. Muslim armies have conquered nations across North Africa, into Europe, east to India, Southeast Asia, Indonesia, north to Turkey, northeast deep into Asia, and all the way up actually into Russia. These green locations show where Islam dominates. So you want to tell me, looking back over the last 1,500 years, that all of these countries were conquered and dominated and brought under submission because of defensive warfare? See, that's absurd. But the propaganda that's put out, because most of us are ignorant of history, people fall for it. This is a recent article. I just pulled this off the web, I believe. There is a fellow in Iran. He's an Iranian, but he converted to a form of Christianity, I guess, some years ago, and he's been under arrest now for a long period of time, awaiting trial. And the provincial court that is determining his case has told him, see, people, Americans don't understand this. If you are born and reared a Muslim and you convert, that's a death penalty offense. If you convert to something else. Now, if you were not born and reared a Muslim, then that's a different matter. If you became a Muslim and then came back out of it. But the fact that you're born and you are a Muslim, well, that's a death penalty offense. And this fellow, by converting to Christianity, the judges have said, you either recant your faith in Christ or we are going to execute you. And he's been there on death row for a good while, and there's a lot of political efforts to get him released. But more indications of where we are in the world in which we live. Most of us are not real familiar with Winston Churchill. He was, of course, the British Prime Minister throughout World War II, had a very distinguished career before that, and then throughout the rest of his life. Back when he was a young fella, back in the late 19th century, he was involved in British military activity in northern Africa, the Sudan, and wrote this book. And look what he says in here. Indeed, it is evident that Christianity, however degraded and distorted by cruelty and intolerance, must always exert a modifying influence on men's passions and protect them from the more violent forms of fanatical fever as we are protected from smallpox by vaccination. His point is, yes, there are people who have done horrible things in the name of Christ. But in doing so, they went against Christianity. That was not as a result of Christianity. Christianity always exerts a moderating influence. It softens people in their violence. But the Mohammedan religion increases instead of lessening the fury of intolerance. It was originally propagated by the sword, and ever since its votaries have been subject above the people of all other creeds to this form of madness. How dreadful are the curses which Mohammedanism lays on its votaries, besides the fanatical frenzy, which is as dangerous in a man as hydrophobia in a dog. There is this fearful fatalistic apathy, improvident habits, slovenly systems of agriculture, sluggish methods of commerce, and insecurity of property exist wherever the followers of the Prophet rule or live. A degraded sensualism deprives this life of its grace and refinement, the next of its dignity and sanctity. The fact that in Mohammedan law every woman must belong to some man as his absolute property, either as a child, a wife, or a concubine, must delay the final extinction of slavery until the faith of Islam has ceased to be a great power among men. Individual Muslims may show splendid qualities. Thousands become the brave and loyal soldiers of the Queen. All know how to die, but the influence of the religion paralyzes the social development of those who follow it. No stronger retrograde force exists in the world, far from being moribund, dead or dying. Mohammedanism is a militant and proselytizing faith. It's already spread throughout Central Africa, raising fearless warriors at every step. And were it not that Christianity is sheltered in the strong arms of science, the science against which it had vainly struggled, the civilization of modern Europe might fall as fell the civilization of ancient Rome. If Christianity does not continue to exert its influence, we may see another worldwide domination of a religion that is opposed to Christianity. That's what he's saying, and he said this way back. Well, I conclude then that Islam and Christianity are in irreparable conflict. The Quran and the Bible contradict each other. I showed you clearly, well, I haven't actually showed you this yet. I'm going to show you this in just a moment, but the Quran advocates polygamy and violence. Now, in the time that we have remaining before our worship hour, I want to show you what the attitude has been in this country by the rank and file Americans and by the architects of our civilization. What has been the attitude about Islam from the very beginning? These men were very decisive and with one accord. I've seen no dissent among them. John Quincy Adams was a quintessential founder. Of course, his dad, John Adams, was our second president, our first vice president, distinguished career, and his son, who was the oldest of John and Abigail Adams' children. He had a little brother named Charles that went off to Harvard like his big brother and dad had done. But you know what he did on campus? Developed a taste for alcohol. Is that happening on our campuses now? And he, even though he married and had a couple of kids, he died an alcoholic in a back alley flop house or whatever it was. Just ruined him. But John Quincy, his father took him when he was probably not even a teenager. Took him overseas to France and places in his governmental duties, and literally walked that boy through the founding of our country. He's very qualified to make assessment of our nation at the very beginning. He himself served not only as our ambassador to a number of countries like Russia and England and others. He served as our sixth president, served in both the U.S. House and the Senate. Only president to have come out of the presidency and then went into the House. And by the way, died on the floor of the House. That's how he ended his life. Anyways, we used to collect a lot of materials from the founding era, print every year materials. And he delivered a series of essays on the Russo-Turkish War. See, this is pre-communism. Russia is under a czar that claims to be Christian, so it claims to be a Christian country. And they were at war with the Turks at this point in history. And if you were to go get this offline, I found this free online. Look what here's a tremendous, insightful assessment of world events. In the 7th century of the Christian era, a wandering Arab of the lineage of Hagar the Egyptian, combining the powers of transcendent genius. By the way, notice how articulate these fellows were compared to us. With the preternatural energy of a fanatic and the fraudulent spirit of an impostor, proclaimed himself as a messenger from heaven and spread desolation and delusion over an extensive portion of the earth. Adopting, notice how politically incorrect this is. You know, should this be printed in newspapers in the country today? Should this be read on the floor of Congress to all of our men and women that are legislators? Well, sure it ought to be. This isn't intended to be offensive, but it's stating truth. This is reality. And obviously Americans increasingly do not want to face reality. Adopting from the sublime conception of the Mosaic law the doctrine of one omnipotent God, he connected indissolubly with it the audacious falsehood that he was himself his prophet and apostle. Adopting from the new revelation of Jesus the faith and hope of immortal life and of future retribution, he humbled it to the dust by adapting all the rewards and sanctions of his religion to the gratification of the sexual passion. He poisoned the sources of human felicity at the fountain by degrading the condition of the female sex and the allowance of polygamy. He declared undistinguishing and exterminating war as part of his religion against all the rest of mankind. The essence of his doctrine was violence and lust, to exalt the brutal over the spiritual part of human nature. Between these two religions, thus contrasted in their characters, a war of 1,200 years has already raged. That war is yet flagrant, nor can it cease, but by the extinction of that imposture, which has been permitted, notice, by God, to prolong the degeneracy of man. While the merciless and dissolute dogmas of the false prophet shall furnish motives to human action, there can never be peace upon earth and goodwill towards men. The hand of Ishmael will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, an allusion to Genesis. The precept of the Quran is perpetual war against all who deny that Muhammad is the prophet of God. The vanquished may purchase their lives by the payment of tribute. The victorious may be appeased by a false and delusive promise of peace. That is, see, if the non-Muslim side is victorious, then the other side, the Muslim side, offers false and delusive promise of peace. The faithful follower of the prophet may submit to the imperious necessities of defeat, but the command to propagate the Muslim creed by the sword is always obligatory when it can be made effective. The commands of the prophet may be performed alike by fraud or force, whatever it takes to advance the religion. Well, notice on each one of these you can either agree or disagree. But I'm showing you what the founders said. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams went to London to meet with the ambassador from one of the Barbary states of North Africa, Tripoli, a Muslim country. They were sent by Congress and were supposed to report back to John Jay, which they did, writing this letter on March 28, 1786. If you go to loc.gov, you can see with your own eyes the handwritten letter. Here it is. We took the liberty to make some inquiries concerning the grounds of their pretensions to make war upon nations who had done them no injury, and observed that we considered all mankind as our friends who had done us no wrong, nor had given us any provocation. The ambassador answered us that it was founded on the laws of their prophet and that it was written in their Quran. You've just read the passages yourself. That all nations who should not have acknowledged their authority were sinners, that it was their right and duty to make war upon them wherever they could be found and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners, that every Muslim who should be slain in battle was sure to go to paradise. Notice we're getting a uniform picture here over the last 200 years. By the way, it's interesting also to me that Islam has been one of the greatest, most prolific perpetrators of slavery in history. Slaves that were imported from Africa to America were generally collected by Arabian slave traders. See, the politically correct politicians and educators are not telling the truth on these matters. Islam has no problem with the institution of slavery. That it was a law that the first who boards an enemy's vessel should have one slave more than his share with the rest, which operated as an incentive to the most desperate valor and enterprise. That it was the practice of their corsairs to bear down upon a ship, for each sailor to take a dagger in each hand, another in his mouth, and leap on board, which so terrified their enemies that very few ever stood against them. He verily believed that the devil assisted his countrymen, for they were almost always successful. There are two quintessential founders telling us about their experience with the ambassador of a prominent Muslim nation. Here is a court case that went to the highest court in the state of New York back shortly at the close of the founding era. Here was the case. There was a man who, out in public, wickedly, maliciously, blasphemously uttered with a loud voice and published in the presence and hearing of divers good and Christian people of and concerning the Christian religion, of and concerning Jesus Christ, the false, scandalous, malicious, wicked, blasphemous words. Can you believe there was a time in our country where if you went out in public and just, uttered obscenities against Christ, that was a punishable offense? Do you know, never was there a time after the beginning of our country where you would be punished if you chose not to be a Christian. Nobody would force you to go to church. But where the founders were coming from was, but neither are you permitted by the Constitution to do things that undermine our civilization. You can't do that either. This fellow was found guilty, sentenced by the court to be imprisoned for 3 months and pay $500, which in 1811 was probably more than a year's salary, I'm guessing. The defense attorney made an argument that Christianity does not make up a part of the common law of this state. Constitution allows free toleration to all religions, all kinds of worship. The exception is to licentiousness, immoral behavior. Refers to conduct, not opinions. Judaism, Islam may be preached here without any legal animadversion. For aught that appears, a prisoner could have been a Jew, a Muslim, a Socinian. If so, he had a right by the Constitution to declare his opinions. That's pretty much the attitude of the courts today, isn't it? The opinion of the court was written by a man who's gone down in American history as one of the fathers of American jurisprudence, whose name is probably hardly ever uttered in any law school in our country, even though these were the guys that wrote the Constitution and knew what they meant by it. He was the Chief Justice. His monumental series, Commentaries on American Law, should be taught and read by law students. Christianity has always been parcel of the law. To cast contumelious reproaches on it tends to weaken the foundation of moral obligation and the efficacy of oaths. Whatever strikes at the root of Christianity tends manifestly to dissolve our civil government. Anybody believe that today? You badmouth Christianity, you're undermining our institutions, even our government. That sounds surreal, bizarre. But these fellows knew what they were talking about. All right, come on. The people of this state, in common with the people of this country, profess the general doctrines of Christianity as the rule of their faith and practice. We've heard that expression before. To scandalize the author of these doctrines is not only in a religious point of view impious, but it's even in respect to the obligations due to society. It's a gross violation of decency. Look, he was even concerned about the tender morals of the young. Any of our politicians concerned about that today? Are they trying to stop things from happening in our country that will pollute and contaminate and injure the moral of our young people? This was a different time. The free, equal, and undisturbed enjoyment of religious opinion, whatever it may be, free and decent discussions on any religious subject, granted and secured, yes. But to revile with malicious and blasphemous contempt the religion professed by almost the whole community? That's an abuse of that right. The Constitution doesn't give you the right to do that. Nor are we bound by any expressions in the Constitution, as some have strangely supposed, either not to punish at all or to punish indiscriminately, like attacks upon the religion of Muhammad or the Grand Lama. And notice what he's saying. Constitution doesn't give you a right to badmouth out in public Christianity and to undermine it. Well, should you then also not badmouth Islam or Buddhism, the Dalai Lama? No, you can badmouth them all you want. Why? For this plain reason. The case assumes we are a Christian people. The morality of the country is deeply engrafted upon Christianity, not upon the doctrines or worship of those. If one politician said such a thing, that would be the end of their political career right there. That'd be it. But I'm telling you, this was the attitude of Americans, rank and file, and the founders of our civilization. We are a people whose manners are refined, whose morals have been elevated and inspired with a more enlarged benevolence by means of the Christian religion. James Iredell was appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court by the first president, served 9 years on the High Court. And in their discussions of the Constitution, are we putting enough safeguards in here to make sure we keep our Christian moorings and we don't let alternative ideologies come in here and mess things up? Well, it's objected that the people of America may perhaps choose representatives who have no religion at all, and that pagans and Mohammedans might be admitted into offices. That's what some of the guys were saying. We got to put stuff in the Constitution, state and federal, to make sure that doesn't happen if we want to keep our country. He said, we don't have to worry about that. It is never to be supposed that the people of America will trust their dearest rights to persons who have no religion at all or a religion materially different from their own. Our people would never be dumb enough to do that. They would understand that their lives are at stake, their way of life, their culture, their country depends on a Christian orientation. You don't have to worry about that. He could not envision a day when Americans would become so ignorant and so out of touch with spiritual reality that they would commit national suicide. That's what we're doing. Samuel Johnston, governor of his home state of North Carolina, one of the members of the ratifying convention of the Constitution, same discussion going on. It's apprehended that Jews, Mohammedans, pagans may be elected to high offices under the government of the United States. But those who are Mohammedans or any others who are not professors of the Christian religion can never be elected to the office of president or other office except in one of two cases. The only way that would ever happen. First, if the people of America lay aside the Christian religion altogether, it could happen. Should this unfortunately take place, well, then the people will put into office people that agree with them or promise to give them money or take care of this or that. Yeah, they may put those in. But that will be an unfortunate day in our country. These men were prophetic in their thinking. Zephaniah Swift, prominent founder. Here's an oration, by the way, on slavery. So many of our founders were adamant in their opposition to slavery. Have we been told that? No, we have not. He wrote an entire oration that he delivered against slavery. The sacred light of the gospel, when it was diffusing itself through the world and ameliorating the condition of men, a new religion broke forth from the East, endowed with the boldest genius and most enterprising spirit. The prophet of Arabia, with the sword and Quran, denounced death or slavery against his opposers and promised to his followers eternal rewards of sensual pleasure in the arms of beauty and in the gardens of paradise. The religion of the Quran is as repugnant as the religion of the Bible is favorable to human happiness. The Muslims filled with a supreme contempt for all other religions and inspired with an invincible zeal to propagate their own, have displayed the crescent on the greatest part of the eastern continent and have reduced to slavery the conquered nation who rejected the faith of their prophet and the laws of the Quran. The establishment of polygamy has degraded the female sex from companions to slaves and doomed them to waste their youth and beauty in the gloomy mansions of the seraglio, which is the harem. Ladies, I'm telling you, the women of America better rise up. You've got enough things to rise up about, but just on the matter of the influence of Islam, what it will do to the female segment of our society. Unless we want to somehow delude ourselves and say, well, I realize for 1,500 years, all of the evidence shows that women have been mistreated in Islamic country, but it's going to be different here. That's kind of how Americans are right now. A state very different from what the lovely sex enjoy in this country, where in consequence of their freedom they exhibit the gentle virtues in their most amiable light and give the highest polish to our manners and the purest joy to domestic life. This is such great stuff. I don't have time to go through all of it. Here's Elias Boudinot, served as president of the Continental Congress, referred to Muhammad as having pretensions to divine authority, and yet it was by the power of the sword and the terror of his government. How his laws changed. Where's the comparison between the supposed prophet of Mecca and the Son of God? With what propriety ought they even to be named together? The difference between these characters is so great, the facts need not be further applied. Another father of American jurisprudence, served on the High Court over 30 years, appointed by James Madison. You know the real object of the First Amendment? Freedom of religion? Listen to this. Freedom of religion. What does that mean? Well, the real object was not to countenance, much less advance Islam or Judaism or infidelity by prostrating Christianity. That's not the purpose of freedom of religion. The purpose of that statement by the founders was, we are not going to allow one Christian sect to rise above the others and receive the exclusive patronage of the national government. We're not going to have, the Baptists be the state religion like they had it. They were under the Church of England. No. All Christian sects are on level footing. Now that's freedom of religion in this country. And for anybody to surmise that the founders meant to give any sort of encouragement or accommodation or approval to non-Christian religions, they have completely misunderstood the founding of our country. Let me show you one more thing. Jedediah Morse, the father of Samuel Morse, delivered a tremendous sermon in which he talked about the need for our government and our religion to be so closely, he said, they are so closely allied, you cannot with propriety separate them. That which supports the interests of Christianity are also necessary to support a free and equal government like our own. In all those countries where there's little or no religion, or a very gross and corrupt one, as in Mohammedan and pagan countries. There you will find, with scarcely a single exception, arbitrary, tyrannical governments, gross ignorance and wickedness, deplorable wretchedness among the people. It is to Christianity that we owe that degree of civil freedom and political and social happiness that mankind now enjoy, and in proportion as the genuine effects of Christianity are diminished, either through unbelief, corruption of its doctrine, or neglect of its institutions, in the same proportion will the people of the nation recede from the blessings of genuine freedom. Do you realize that the more politically correct we are in celebrating diversity and inviting all ideologies and religions, the more we are undermining our very happiness as a civilization, which we now enjoy? Now, I'm telling you, that's what these fellows said. And notice the final statement here. Wherever the pillars of Christianity shall be overthrown, our present republican forms of government and all the blessings that you and I are wallowing in every day must fall. You believe that? We need to be begging our God to help us through all this. Thank you for your attention.